I stared at the empty driveway where my Honda Civic should have been parked. My heart was racing as I noticed a note stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet. It read, "You need to learn self-reliance. Taking your car is for your own good. No free rides in life, son." I recognized my dad Greg's handwriting immediately. The kitchen clock read 7:45 in the morning. My life-changing job interview started in exactly 1 hour, 15 miles away. 3 months of applications. Finally an opportunity. And now this. I had moved back in with my father, temporarily, after being laid off from my marketing job 3 months ago. The tech startup I worked for had downsized drastically, and despite my performance reviews always being stellar, I was among the newest hires to go. At 28, living with my dad again wasn't my idea of success, but I viewed it as a responsible financial decision while I regrouped and searched for new opportunities. My relationship with my father had always been complicated. Greg Taylor was a man who believed deeply in hard work and self-sufficiency. Maybe too deeply. His favorite phrase, which I had heard since childhood, was "no free rides." He didn't just say it, he lived it, and he made sure I lived it too. When I was 10, I learned what this philosophy meant in practice. While other kids received birthday gifts freely given with love, my father made me work for mine. 2 weeks before my birthday, he would present a list of extra chores, each with a point value. Only by accumulating enough points could I earn my birthday presents. When I complained once that my friends didn't have to earn their gifts, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Those kids are being raised to be dependent. I'm raising you to be a man." By 16, he started charging me rent for my bedroom. It wasn't much, about $50 a month, but the principle bothered me. When I questioned why I should pay to live in my own home, he explained that it was preparation for the real world. He deposited the money into an account he controlled, which I later discovered was intended to teach me about saving. His methods were unusual, but I couldn't deny they taught me financial responsibility. Despite these harsh lessons, or perhaps because of them, I grew up extremely responsible with money. I saved diligently from my first job bagging groceries at 16. By 19, I had purchased my own car, a used Honda Civic that I still drove. I worked my way through college, taking extra shifts at the campus bookstore to avoid student loans. I had never asked my father for handouts, partly out of pride, and partly because I knew the answer would be a lesson rather than help. Now, after being laid off and exhausting most of my emergency fund during 3 months of unsuccessful job hunting, I had finally landed an interview with Marshall Media, a growing digital marketing firm. The position offered the stability and growth potential I desperately needed. I had spent weeks researching the company, preparing for potential interview questions, and fine-tuning my portfolio. Everything was ready. Except now, my car was gone. I called my father's cell phone immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times with the same result. This wasn't like him. Greg was always reachable, almost obsessively so. He expected others to be equally responsive, another of his real-world principles. "Dad, it's Arden. I need my car for the interview today. Call me back immediately," I said to his voicemail, trying to keep the panic from my voice. While waiting for his call, I pulled out my phone and opened the home security app. We had installed cameras around the house last year after a break-in at a neighbor's place. I scrolled back through the footage and found what I was looking for. At 5:30 that morning, while I was still asleep, my father had taken my car. The footage clearly showed him backing my Honda out of the driveway in the dim pre-dawn light. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was premeditated. My bedroom door flew open as I rushed back inside to look for any additional clues. There, on my desk, was another note I had missed in my morning rush. "Sometimes the hard path makes you stronger. Find your own way there." I crumpled the note in my fist, the reality of the situation hitting me. My father had deliberately sabotaged my interview. After everything I'd done to be responsible, to stand on my own 2 feet, he was treating me like a child who needed another harsh lesson. But why today, of all days? I had exactly 50 minutes to make it 15 miles across town, for an interview that could change everything. My hands shook slightly as I opened my rideshare app. The estimated wait for a driver was 25 minutes due to morning rush hour. That would leave me with almost no buffer for traffic. I tried another service with similar results. Come on, I muttered, pacing the living room floor. I called my friend Travis, hoping he might be able to give me a lift. I'm already at work, man, Travis said apologetically. I started the early shift today. Otherwise, I'd totally help you out. I thanked him and hung up, then tried my neighbor Susan. Her call went to voicemail too. It seemed like the universe was conspiring against me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the rideshare app pinged. A driver named Gary had accepted my ride. Estimated arrival, 12 minutes. I used the waiting time to double-check my portfolio, straighten my tie, and mentally rehearse potential interview questions. When Gary finally pulled up in his blue Subaru, I practically leaped into the back seat. "Marshall Media offices, please," I said. "I'm running late for an interview." "No problem," Gary replied cheerfully. "I know a shortcut." Gary's shortcut turned out to be anything but. Despite my polite suggestions about the route I knew would be faster, he insisted his way would avoid traffic. 20 minutes later, we were sitting at a standstill on a congested side street that I had specifically wanted to avoid. "Maybe we should try the main road now?" I suggested, checking the time on my phone. 10 minutes until my interview. "Trust me, this always opens up," Gary said confidently. It didn't. By the time we finally pulled up to the sleek glass building housing Marshall Media, I was 12 minutes late. I threw a larger-than-necessary tip on the app and ran inside, my heart pounding and a thin layer of stress sweat forming under my carefully pressed shirt. The receptionist looked at me sympathetically as I announced myself, out of breath and visibly anxious. "Miss Walker is waiting in conference room 3, she said. "I'll let her know you're here." Jessica Walker, the senior marketing director according to my research, was a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense haircut. When I entered the conference room, she glanced pointedly at her watch. "Mr. Taylor, we have a strict policy about punctuality at Marshall Media," she said. "I understand completely," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I deeply apologize for my tardiness. I experienced an unexpected transportation issue this morning. It's not an excuse, but I want you to know that it's not reflective of my work ethic or commitment." She studied me for a moment, then nodded slightly. "I appreciate your honesty. Since you're here, let's proceed, although we'll need to condense some sections." Despite the rocky start, the interview gradually found its rhythm. As we discussed digital marketing strategies and analyzed campaign case studies, Jessica seemed increasingly engaged. When I shared my ideas about integrating traditional marketing approaches with newer technologies, she actually smiled. "Your portfolio shows solid work," she admitted, flipping through the samples I had brought. "And your answers demonstrate both technical knowledge and creative thinking. That's a combination we value." By the time we wrapped up, I felt cautiously optimistic. Jessica's final handshake was firm, and she mentioned I would hear from them within a week regarding next steps. I was mentally and emotionally drained when I finally made it back home late that afternoon. After the interview, I had spent hours at a nearby coffee shop, applying for backup positions and researching public transportation options in case my car remained missing. When I walked through the front door, my father was calmly watching television in the living room, feet propped up on the coffee table. "How'd the interview go?" he asked casually, as if he hadn't completely upended my morning. "Are you serious right now?" I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. "You took my car on the day of the most important interview I've had in months." Greg muted the TV and turned to face me. "And yet you made it there anyway, didn't you?" "I was late. I had to spend money I don't have on a rideshare with a driver who got lost. I walked into that interview sweating and anxious. And I bet you learned something valuable about having backup plans," he said matter-of-factly. "What if your car had broken down naturally? What if you had a flat tire? The world doesn't wait for your transportation problems, Arden." "This wasn't a natural car problem," I countered. This was my father deliberately sabotaging my opportunity to become more independent, which is supposedly what you want for me. Greg shook his head, a familiar look of disappointment crossing his face. You're missing the bigger picture. True independence means being prepared for anything, not relying on everything going according to plan. I was about to argue further when something he said caught my attention. Wait, how did you know I had an interview today? A flicker of something crossed his face before he answered. You mentioned it last week. No, I didn't, I said slowly. I only got the interview call 3 days ago, and I specifically didn't tell you because I knew you'd have opinions about it. Greg shifted in his seat, suddenly looking uncomfortable. You must have mentioned it in passing. I didn't, I insisted. Unless you've been going through my things, or... A terrible thought occurred to me. I pulled out my phone and opened my email, quickly navigating to the security settings. The account had last been accessed from our home Wi-Fi at 4:30 that morning, while I was asleep. You've been reading my emails, I said, the betrayal washing over me. You've been monitoring my job applications. Greg didn't deny it. Instead, he said something that shocked me even more. Marshall Media is beneath your potential, Arden. I've been watching their company performance. Their growth is unsustainable, and their management structure is chaotic at best. It's not a place where you'll thrive. I stared at him, speechless. Not only had he invaded my privacy by accessing my email without permission, but he had taken it upon himself to evaluate my job prospects as if I were still a child incapable of making my own decisions. That's not your call to make, I finally managed to say. And it definitely doesn't justify stealing my car or reading my private emails. I'm your father, he said, as if that explained everything. Sometimes protecting you means doing things you don't understand. I walked away before I said something I would regret. In my room, I sat on the edge of my bed, hands shaking with anger and disbelief. The interview had gone well despite the sabotage, but the violation of privacy felt overwhelming. I had always known my father was controlling, but this crossed a line I hadn't even imagined he would approach. The next morning, I woke up early and looked out my window. My car was back in the driveway. A surge of relief washed through me until I tried to locate my keys. They weren't on my desk where I always kept them, nor were they in any of my drawers or coat pockets. I found my father in the kitchen, calmly making coffee as if nothing had happened. Where are my keys? I asked directly. Greg took a slow sip from his mug before answering. I've hidden them. What? Why? Consider it an opportunity for growth, he said, setting his mug down. I've placed your keys somewhere in town, along with 3 clues to help you find them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This isn't a game, Dad. I need my car for job applications, for interviews, for basic transportation, and you'll get it back, he replied. Once you solve the puzzle. First clue, where the eagle learned to soar, wisdom waits behind the door. I recognized the reference immediately. The eagle was our high school mascot. Apparently, my first destination was somewhere at my old school. This is ridiculous, I muttered. Public transportation runs every 30 minutes, Greg said cheerfully. Better get started if you want your keys back today. I had no choice. The bus ride to my old high school took 45 minutes with transfers. As I sat watching the familiar streets pass by, I wondered how my life had come to this point. At 28, I was being sent on a scavenger hunt by my father as if I were a child. When I arrived at Lincoln High School, I had to convince the front office that I was an alumnus wanting to visit my old baseball coach, Coach Peterson. After showing my ID and signing in, I was directed to the athletic department. Coach Peterson hadn't changed much in the 10 years since I'd graduated. His hair was a bit grayer, but he still had the same authoritative stance and piercing gaze that had kept our team in line. Arden Taylor, he said, seeming genuinely pleased to see me. Your dad mentioned you might stop by today. Of course, he had prepared Coach Peterson for my visit. He left something for me? Coach nodded and retrieved an envelope from his desk. Before I give you this, want to tell me what's going on? Your dad was pretty vague. I sighed. He's teaching me a lesson about self-reliance, by hiding my car keys and making me find them through some elaborate scavenger hunt. Coach Peterson's expression shifted, a frown forming. "That sounds like Greg," he said, his tone suggesting this wasn't entirely a compliment. "You know, your dad and I butted heads quite a bit when you were on the team." This was news to me. "You did? About what?" "About you, mainly," Coach said, leaning against his desk. "Your dad wanted me to be harder on you, to push you beyond what I thought was appropriate. There was a game your junior year when you pitched a complete game, struck out 11 batters. Your arm was practically falling off by the 9th inning, but you refused to come out. After the game, instead of congratulating you, your dad complained to me that I should have made you throw more breaking balls. I remembered that game. I had been so proud of my performance, and so hurt by my father's criticism afterward, that I had focused only on what I'd done wrong rather than what I'd accomplished. He was always like that," I admitted. "Nothing was ever quite good enough." Coach nodded. "Some parents confuse pushing their kids with supporting them. They're not the same thing." He handed me the envelope. "Good luck with whatever lesson he's trying to teach you today." Inside the envelope was the second clue. "Old friends keep secrets of the past. Bill knows why patterns last." Bill was our family friend who had known my father since they were in college together. I thanked Coach Peterson and headed to the bus stop, now facing a 30-minute ride to Bill's neighborhood across town. Bill's house was a modest ranch-style home with a well-kept garden. When he answered the door, his eyebrows rose in surprise. "Arden, didn't expect to see you today." "My dad sent me," I explained wearily. "Something about a clue and my car keys?" Understanding dawned on his face. "Ah, one of Greg's lessons. Come on in." Bill's living room was comfortable and lived in, with family photos covering most surfaces. He disappeared into another room and returned with a small wooden box. "Your dad dropped this off yesterday," he said, handing it to me. He seemed pretty worked up about something. I took the box but didn't open it immediately. "Bill, can I ask you something? You've known my dad forever. Was he always like this? So rigid about self-reliance and life lessons?" Bill settled into his armchair with a thoughtful expression. "Not always. No. Your grandfather had a lot to do with it." "Grandpa Taylor?" "I barely remember him. My grandfather had died when I was very young. That's because he wasn't around much," Bill explained. "He abandoned the family when your dad was 14. Just packed up and left. No warning, no goodbye, no support payments. Your grandmother had to work 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads." This was family history I had never heard before. Dad never told me any of this. "Greg doesn't talk about it," Bill said, "but it shaped him profoundly. He had to become the man of the house overnight, taking care of your aunt when your grandmother was working. I think that's where his obsession with self-reliance comes from. He never wants you to experience that kind of abandonment or be unprepared for life's challenges. But that doesn't justify controlling my life or invading my privacy," I argued. Bill nodded slowly. "No, it doesn't. And there's something else you should know. Your dad has been having panic attacks recently." "What? Since when?" "Since his company started talking about early retirement packages," Bill said. "He's 56, and they're looking to cut costs by encouraging older employees to leave. He's terrified of not being able to provide for himself, of becoming dependent on others. And I think he's projecting some of that fear onto you and your situation." This new information shifted something in my understanding of my father. His controlling behavior wasn't just about me. It was about his own deep-seated fears. As we were talking, my phone rang. It was Jessica Walker from Marshall Media. "Mr. Taylor, I'm calling to invite you for a second interview this Friday at 10 a.m., she said. "We were impressed with your portfolio and would like to discuss some specific projects with you." "That's fantastic news," I replied, trying to contain my excitement. "I'll be there, absolutely." After hanging up, I opened the wooden box Bill had given me. Inside was a key, but not my car key. It was smaller, possibly for a locker or small padlock. Beneath it was the third clue. The place where stories live in rows. There's one that everyone knows. The library. It had to be. I thanked Bill for his insights and headed back out, my mind swirling with new information about my father even as I continued this frustrating treasure hunt. The local library was another bus ride away. The morning of my second interview with Marshall Media arrived with a new crisis. I needed to bring additional portfolio samples as Jessica had requested, but when I tried to access my cloud storage account, where I kept backup copies of all my work, I found my password had been changed. "What the hell?" I muttered, staring at my laptop screen in disbelief. The password I'd used consistently for months was suddenly invalid. I tried the recovery option, but the backup email had also been changed to an address I didn't recognize. My phone rang. It was Jessica Walker. "Arden, I wanted to remind you to bring those additional campaign samples we discussed, particularly the social media analytics from your work at Tech Growth," she said. "Absolutely," I assured her, trying to keep panic from my voice. "I'll have everything ready." After hanging up, I stared at the locked account screen. This couldn't be coincidence, not after everything else that had happened. I marched into the kitchen where my father was preparing to leave. "Did you change my cloud storage password?" I demanded. Greg barely glanced up as he packed a small, overnight bag. "I'm heading out of town for the day. Business meeting in Springfield." "That doesn't answer my question." "You rely too heavily on digital storage," he said, zipping up his bag. "What happens if there's a server failure or a hacked account? Always keep physical backups of important documents." "I do have physical backups," I said through gritted teeth, "in my desk at my old apartment, which I can't get to without my car." Greg shrugged. "Sounds like you've identified a flaw in your backup system. Good lesson for the future." He checked his watch. "I need to get going. Good luck with your interview." And just like that, he was out the door before I could respond. I spent the next hour frantically trying to recover my account, but without success. Finally, I called my neighbor Susan, who I'd spotted outside watering her plants. "Susan, I hate to ask, but is there any chance you could give me a ride to my interview this morning? It's really important." "Of course, honey," she said kindly. "What time do you need to leave?" 9:15 would be perfect." "Thank you so much." I spent the remaining time preparing as best I could without my full portfolio. I had some samples on my laptop, but not the specific analytics Jessica had requested. This was going to be an uphill battle. At 9:10, my phone rang again. It was Susan. "Arden, I'm so sorry, but my car won't start," she said, sounding genuinely distressed. "I've tried everything, but it's just making this awful clicking sound." "That's okay," I said automatically, though it was anything but okay. "Thanks for letting me know." 2 transportation options gone in one morning seemed beyond coincidence. With growing suspicion, I called Travis in desperation. "Hey, any chance you're free to give me a lift to an interview?" "Actually, I have the morning off," Travis said. "I can be there in 15 minutes." True to his word, Travis arrived promptly, and we set off toward the Marshall Media offices. I filled him in on the strange events of the past few days. "Your dad did all that?" Travis asked incredulously. "That's crossing so many lines." "Tell me about it," I agreed. "And now somehow my cloud account password has been changed, so I don't have access to all the materials they specifically asked for." "That's seriously messed up," Travis said, shaking his head. "No offense, but your dad needs boundaries." We were making good time until we hit unexpected construction that brought traffic to a standstill. "This wasn't here yesterday," Travis said, peering ahead at the line of cones and construction equipment. "Must be emergency repairs or something." We sat immobile for 20 minutes before traffic began to inch forward. By the time we finally arrived at Marshall Media, I was running 10 minutes late. Again, Jessica's expression when I entered the conference room was noticeably cooler than during our previous meeting. "Mr. Taylor, punctuality appears to be an ongoing challenge for you," she observed. "I sincerely apologize," I said. "There was unexpected construction on Westfield Avenue that brought traffic to a complete stop." "I see. And the additional samples we discussed?" I explained as professionally as possible that I was experiencing technical difficulties with my cloud storage, but could walk her through the campaigns, using the limited materials I had available. The interview deteriorated from there. Without the specific analytics Jessica wanted to see, my explanations felt incomplete. Her questions became increasingly pointed, and her note-taking decreased as the meeting progressed. By the end, the enthusiasm I had sensed during our first meeting had evaporated. "We'll be in touch," she said as she concluded the interview. The standard phrase that often meant the opposite. I left the building feeling defeated. The job that had seemed within reach was now almost certainly gone, and I strongly suspected my father's interventions were at least partly to blame. When I returned home, I was surprised to find my father's car in the driveway. He had said he would be gone all day, yet here he was, watching a baseball game on TV, as if nothing had happened. "You're back early," I observed coldly. "Meeting ended sooner than expected," he replied without looking away from the screen. "Did Susan's car really have trouble starting this morning?" I asked directly. Now he did look at me, his expression revealing nothing. How would I know about Susan's car problems? Because they're awfully convenient, just like the construction that wasn't there yesterday, and my mysteriously changed cloud storage password. Greg muted the TV. "Real winners overcome obstacles, Arden. The business world is full of unexpected challenges and competitors who won't play fair. If you can't handle a few roadblocks during an interview process, how will you handle the pressures of the job itself?" "This isn't about my ability to handle pressure," I shot back. "This is about you actively sabotaging my opportunities because they don't fit your vision of what I should be doing." "Marshall Media is a stepping stone at best," Greg said dismissively. "You're capable of much more. That's not your decision to make." I stormed off to my room, but not before checking my email on my phone. A notification caught my eye. Password reset confirmation. I opened it and found that 2 weeks ago, someone had changed my email recovery options. The notification had been automatically archived, which was why I hadn't seen it until now. But that wasn't the most disturbing discovery. As I scrolled through my sent items folder, I found emails I had never written. Responses to job openings I had applied for, politely declining to proceed with the application process. At least 3 promising positions I had never heard back from, all supposedly withdrawn by me. The betrayal cut deep. My father hadn't just been monitoring my job search. He had been actively sabotaging it, deciding which opportunities were worthy of me and which weren't, all without my knowledge or consent. I had reached my breaking point. I couldn't continue living under my father's manipulative control. That evening I packed a duffel bag with essential clothes and toiletries. Travis had already agreed I could crash on his couch temporarily, while I figured out my next move. Before leaving, I decided to make one last search for my car keys. My father was out in the backyard on a phone call, giving me a chance to look through his office, a room I rarely entered. The office was meticulously organized, with files neatly labeled and books arranged by height on the shelves. I started with the obvious places: desk drawers, filing cabinets, bookshelves. No keys. As I moved a stack of folders, a larger manila envelope fell to the floor, spilling its contents. Family documents, mostly old insurance papers, birth certificates. One bundle caught my attention. Letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, addressed to my father in handwriting. I recognized with a jolt. My mother's. She had passed away when I was 15 after a long battle with cancer. I hadn't seen her handwriting in years. I knew I shouldn't read them. They were private correspondence between my parents. But after discovering how thoroughly my father had violated my privacy, my moral compass was compromised. I carefully untied the ribbon. The letters dated back to when I was in middle school. Most were mundane family matters, but several expressed my mother's concerns about my father's parenting approach. "Greg, I'm worried about how hard you push Arden," one letter read. "He's just a boy, trying to please his father. Your constant lessons about self-reliance are making him anxious. Yesterday he was afraid to ask me for help with his homework, because he said he needed to figure it out himself. Children should feel safe asking for help." Another letter, dated just months before her death, was more direct. I fear what will happen when I'm gone. You'll have sole influence over him, and your fear of dependency will shape his view of the world. Please remember that strength isn't just about standing alone. It's also about knowing when to lean on others. My mother's words hit me hard. She had seen the pattern, had tried to intervene, but her early death had left me fully under my father's influence during my formative years. I carefully retied the letters and returned them to the envelope. As I was about to place it back on the desk, I noticed a business card that had fallen out with the documents. It was for Frank Taylor, my uncle, my father's brother. I had barely seen him since childhood. The card listed a local address and phone number. On impulse, I pocketed the card. Then I continued my search, opening the small closet at the back of the office. There, on a high shelf, I spotted a familiar key ring. My car keys. The whole scavenger hunt had been a diversion, the keys hidden in the house all along. I took them and left a note on the kitchen counter. Staying with Travis for a while. We need space. I took my keys. Once at Travis's apartment, I settled onto his surprisingly comfortable couch and pulled out Uncle Frank's card. It was late, past 9, but I decided to try the number anyway. Hello? A gruff voice answered. Uncle Frank? This is Arden. Arden Taylor, Greg's son. A pause. Arden? Well, this is unexpected. How are you, kid? Not great, honestly. I'm trying to understand some things about my dad, and I thought you might have some insight. Frank chuckled, but there was little humor in it. That's putting it mildly. Haven't spoken to my brother in what, 8 years now? 8 years? What happened? The usual. Greg decided he knew what was best for me, tried to run my life, got angry when I wouldn't comply. Same old Greg. Over the next hour, Frank filled in gaps in my family history I had never known existed. How Greg had alienated not just Frank, but their sister Ellen as well. How he had driven away friends by constantly judging their life choices. How he had once threatened to report Frank's then-girlfriend to immigration because he thought she was using Frank for citizenship. Your father has a pattern, Frank explained. He convinces himself he's helping people by controlling them. It comes from a place of fear, honestly. After our dad left, Greg became obsessed with never being vulnerable, never depending on anyone who might abandon him. But he took it too far. Did you know he's been sabotaging my job search? I asked. Reading my emails, canceling applications, taking my car to make me miss interviews. Frank sighed heavily. Sadly, that sounds exactly like something he would do. He did similar things to me when I wanted to start my restaurant. Said the location I'd chosen was all wrong, that I needed more experience, that I was rushing into failure. When I went ahead anyway, he actually called the bank to try to interfere with my loan. That's horrible, I said. The restaurant's been successful for 10 years now, Frank added with satisfaction. No thanks to your father. As we were talking, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from Jessica Walker at Marshall Media. After careful consideration, we've decided to move forward with another candidate whose experience better aligns with our current needs. We appreciate your interest in Marshall Media. The rejection stung, but it wasn't unexpected after the disastrous second interview. I mentioned it to Frank, who offered sympathetic words of encouragement. Listen, Arden, there's something else you should know, Frank said after a pause. Something that happened years ago that you might not be aware of. What is it? Do you remember applying to that design school in New York? Your senior year of high school? I did remember. It had been my dream school, offering a specialized program that combined design with marketing. I had worked incredibly hard on the application portfolio. I got rejected. It was disappointing. But I moved on, went to state for marketing instead. You didn't get rejected, Frank said quietly. You got a full scholarship. My mind went blank. What? That's impossible. I got the rejection letter. I saw it. Greg showed me the acceptance letter and scholarship offer, Frank insisted. He was furious about it. said design was an unstable career path, that marketing was more practical. We had a huge fight about it. He was convinced he knew what was best for your future. Are you saying he intercepted my acceptance letter and faked a rejection? My voice rose in disbelief. That's exactly what I'm saying. He admitted it during our argument. Said sometimes parents have to make hard choices for their children's futures. That was the last big blowout before we stopped speaking entirely. I felt physically ill. My father had altered the entire trajectory of my life, steering me away from my passion and toward what he considered a more practical path. 8 years of career development, all based on a massive lie. I can't believe he would do that, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew it was entirely consistent with the pattern of control I had discovered. Believe it, Frank said grimly. And it's high time you broke free of his influence, Arden. You're 28 years old. Your life should be your own. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence on Travis's couch. The design school revelation was the final piece of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was solving. My father's control wasn't just annoying or overbearing. It was destructive, altering the very course of my life without my knowledge or consent. I finally understood that what I needed wasn't just distance from my father, but a complete reclaiming of my independence. And that would require a comprehensive plan. Over the next few days, I formulated a strategy to regain control of my life. First, I secured my digital independence. Using Travis's computer, I changed all my passwords and set up two-factor authentication on every account. I created new recovery email addresses my father had no knowledge of, and checked all my accounts for unauthorized access. Next, I focused on financial security. I called my old colleague Marissa, who had landed at a digital agency after our startup downsized. "I've been meaning to reach out to you," she said when I explained my situation. "We have some freelance projects that could use your expertise. Nothing full-time, but enough to get some income flowing while you job hunt." I gratefully accepted, and by the end of the day, I had a contract for a 3-week project redesigning a client's marketing materials. The pay wasn't substantial, but it would cover basic expenses while I regrouped. With some income secured, I began apartment hunting. I found a small studio within my price range in a decent neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, and, most importantly, mine alone. The landlord agreed to a 6-month lease with the first month's rent due at signing, which I could manage with my freelance earnings. I also researched my legal rights regarding my car. Though I had been living at my father's house, the Honda Civic was solely in my name. I had purchased it with my own money, maintained it, insured it, and kept all the documentation. I contacted an automotive attorney who confirmed that my father had no legal right to retain or restrict access to my vehicle. "If he's withheld your property, you have grounds for a formal complaint," the lawyer advised. But often a simple demand letter outlining the legal consequences is enough to resolve these situations without court involvement. Throughout this process, I maintained minimal contact with my father. I texted him daily to confirm I was safe, but declined his increasingly insistent requests to talk things through in person. I needed space to implement my plan without his interference. After a week at Travis's, I returned to my father's house to collect more of my belongings. I timed my visit for when I knew he would be at work, but as I was loading boxes into my car, his vehicle pulled into the driveway. He must have come home early. "Planning to disappear without a conversation?" he asked, approaching me with a frown. "I told you I was staying with Travis," I replied, continuing to load my things. "You can't just run away from problems, Arden. That's not how I raised you." "I'm not running away. I'm establishing boundaries." He followed me into the house as I gathered the last of my clothes. "This is ridiculous. You're overreacting to a few life lessons." "Life lessons?" I stopped and faced him directly. "You read my private emails. You sabotage job opportunities. You took my car without permission. You changed my cloud storage password. And according to Uncle Frank, you intercepted my design school acceptance letter and scholarship offer 8 years ago, completely altering the course of my career." Greg's expression darkened at the mention of Frank. You spoke to Frank? He's always been jealous of my success, always trying to turn people against me. This isn't about Frank. This is about you controlling my life under the guise of teaching me self-reliance. Everything I've done has been for your benefit, he insisted. That design school would have left you with an impractical degree. Marshall Media is a stepping stone at best. I've been trying to guide you toward better opportunities. Like what? I challenged. Greg's expression shifted, becoming almost excited. I've been meaning to tell you. I spoke with Bob Reynolds in HR at my company. There's an opening in the marketing department. Entry level. But with your experience, you could advance quickly. The benefits are excellent, and I could mentor you directly. I stared at him, incredulous. You got me an interview at your company without asking me? Better than an interview, he said proudly. Bob's willing to meet with you tomorrow morning. The position is practically yours if you want it. Did it ever occur to you to ask if I want to work at your insurance company? Or to work under your supervision? It's a fantastic opportunity, Greg insisted. Financial stability, clear advancement path, strong corporate culture. It's what you want for me, I countered. Not what I want for myself. My phone rang before he could respond. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway, grateful for the interruption. Is this Arden Taylor? A woman's voice asked. Yes, speaking. This is Natalie Denton from Marshall Media. I'm calling from our content strategy department. We were very impressed with your portfolio, particularly your work on integrated social campaigns. Thank you, I said, confused. But I received a rejection email from Jessica Walker yesterday. Yes, for the position in her department, Natalie confirmed. But I saw your application materials and thought you might be a better fit for my team. Would you be interested in interviewing for a senior content strategist role? The compensation package is actually more competitive than the position you originally applied for. I felt a surge of hope. I would definitely be interested. Excellent. How does tomorrow at 2 p.m. work for your schedule? We confirmed the details, and I hung up, aware that my father had been listening to every word. Forget that, he said immediately. The insurance job is a sure thing. This would be starting the interview process all over again, with no guarantee. It's my decision, I said firmly, and I've already made an appointment with an attorney about my car. Greg's face flushed. An attorney? You would take legal action against your own father? Only if necessary. The car is legally mine. I have all the documentation to prove it. Documentation won't help you drive it, Greg said coldly. While you've been hiding at Travis's place, I sold parts from your engine to a mechanic I know, teaching you an important lesson about resource management. I felt a wave of shock. You dismantled my car? Just temporarily, he said, as if this were perfectly reasonable. The parts can be repurchased and reinstalled. Consider it a lesson in negotiation and conflict resolution. The calculated malice of this action stunned me. This wasn't a lesson. It was sabotage. Pure and simple. After everything I've done for you, Greg continued, his voice rising, this is how you repay me? By threatening legal action? By talking to Frank behind my back? I've dedicated my life to making you strong, independent, prepared for the world. And this is the thanks I get? I recognized the manipulation tactic for what it was. I'm leaving now, I said as calmly as I could. I'll be back for the rest of my things once I've settled into my new apartment. New apartment? Greg looked genuinely shocked. You've signed a lease? Yes. Moving in next week. Something in his expression changed then. A flicker of realization that his control was truly slipping away. For a moment, he looked almost vulnerable, but I couldn't afford to let that sway me. Too many years of manipulation had taught me to be cautious. I gathered the last of my things and walked out, leaving him standing in the hallway, for once without the final word. The interview with Natalie Denton at Marshall Media went exceptionally well. Unlike Jessica Walker's more traditional approach, Natalie was interested in creative thinking and adaptive strategy. She responded enthusiastically to my ideas about integrating traditional marketing with emerging technologies. "Your perspective is exactly what we're looking for," she said as the interview concluded. "Someone who understands both the established principles and the evolving landscape." 2 days later, I received an offer letter. The position offered better compensation than I had initially hoped for, with opportunities for growth and creative input. I accepted immediately. Meanwhile, I moved forward, with establishing my independence on all fronts. The attorney I'd consulted sent a formal demand letter to my father regarding my car, outlining the legal ownership and the consequences of tampering with someone else's property. I also filed a police report documenting the unauthorized modification of my vehicle, creating an official record of the situation. With the freelance work from Marissa, I had enough to cover the security deposit and first month's rent on my studio apartment. The place was small but functional, with large windows that filled the space with natural light. Most importantly, it was mine alone, a space where I could make decisions without interference. Travis helped me move in, bringing a housewarming gift of a small potted plant. "For your fresh start," he said with a grin. My father remained silent for several days after receiving the attorney's letter. Then, unexpectedly, Uncle Frank called me. "Your father reached out to me," he said, sounding surprised. "First time in 8 years. What did he want?" "To talk about you mainly. He's upset, obviously. Feels betrayed. But I think reality is finally starting to sink in." "What reality?" "That his controlling behavior has consequences. That he's pushed away everyone who cares about him. Me, his friends, and now you." A week after moving into my apartment, I received a check in the mail from my father, along with a receipt from an auto repair shop. The check covered the cost of replacing the parts he had removed from my car, plus additional funds for inconvenience. There was no note, no apology, just the check and receipt. I used the money to have my car fully repaired. The mechanic confirmed that all the missing parts had been replaced with new ones, actually upgrading some components in the process. My Honda was soon back in working order, perhaps better than before. As the days passed, I settled into a rhythm of work and independence. The content strategist position at Marshall Media was challenging and rewarding. I formed connections with my colleagues, discovered new skills, and felt my confidence growing. My small apartment became a home, decorated with prints of design work I admired. Reminders of the path not taken but perhaps not permanently closed. I didn't hear from my father for nearly a month. Then, on a Sunday afternoon, I received a text. "Can we talk?" In person. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. My father looked different somehow, less imposing than I remembered. There were new lines around his eyes, and his normally perfect posture seemed slightly diminished. "You look well," he said as we sat down with our coffees. "I am well," I replied truthfully. He nodded, turning his cup in his hands. "I've been seeing someone, a therapist." This was perhaps the last thing I expected him to say. "Really?" "Frank suggested it, actually. We've been talking again, trying to repair some of the damage." He cleared his throat. "The therapist thinks I have control issues stemming from abandonment trauma. Uncle Frank mentioned Grandpa leaving when you were young." Greg's jaw tightened slightly. "Yes. It shaped me in ways I didn't fully understand. Made me determined never to be vulnerable, never to depend on anyone. And I wanted the same for you, to spare you from ever feeling that helplessness. But you went too far," I said quietly. He nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to see that. My therapist says my fear of abandonment manifested as controlling behavior, that by trying to direct every aspect of your life, I was actually creating the very thing I feared most, driving you away." It wasn't a full apology, but it was more self-awareness than I had ever heard from him. We talked for over an hour, covering ground we had never explored before. He spoke about his early years raising me as a widower after my mother died, his fears for my future, his genuine belief that his actions were protective rather than controlling. "The design school acceptance," I said eventually. "That was unforgivable." He looked down at his hands. "I convinced myself I was saving you from financial instability, from a career of struggle. I believed marketing was the safer path. It wasn't your choice to make. No, he admitted. It wasn't. We parted with an agreement to continue talking, to work on establishing a healthier relationship with clear boundaries. It would be a long process, requiring patience and commitment from both of us. But it was a beginning. Over the next 6 months, my life transformed. I excelled at martial media, earning a performance bonus and expanded responsibilities. I saved enough to upgrade to a slightly larger apartment, one with space for a small home office. And I began taking evening design courses, reconnecting with the passion I had set aside years before. My father and I established a cautious new relationship. We spoke weekly, had dinner monthly, but maintained our separate lives. He continued therapy, working to understand and address his controlling tendencies. There were setbacks and difficult conversations, but also moments of genuine connection that had been rare in our previous dynamic. During one of our dinners, he surprised me with a folder containing documents. "What's this?" I asked. "Information about Design Masters programs," he said. "If you're interested in pursuing that path, even part-time, I thought these might be useful resources." It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one. For the first time, he was supporting my choices rather than trying to make them for me. Looking back at the morning my car disappeared, I can see now that it was the breaking point in a lifetime of control, disguised as guidance. That seemingly cruel act forced me to confront the deeper patterns that had shaped both our lives, to break free from cycles of dependency and control, and to discover what true self-reliance actually means. Real independence isn't about standing completely alone, rejecting all support and connection. It's about having the courage to make your own choices, to establish healthy boundaries, and to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than control or obligation. Sometimes the hardest lessons arrive in unexpected packages, like missing car keys on the morning of an important interview. Have you ever experienced someone controlling your life for your own good? How did you establish boundaries while maintaining the relationship? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might benefit from it. Thank you for listening, and I hope this journey brings some insight or comfort to your own path toward authentic independence.